Karen's face contorted with rage as she stared down the petite woman across the fence. "I'm going to call the FBI on you, you little criminal," she shrieked, jabbing a finger toward her neighbor. Samantha stood her ground, jaw clenched. "Go ahead, Karen. But I'm calling animal control on your cats first." The air crackled with tension as the two women glared at each other, their suburban yard a battlefield. Karen's cats, mangy and snarling, paced behind her, sensing the confrontation. Samantha had tried to reason with the older woman for weeks, politely requesting she license her pets and keep them off the shared lawn. But Karen had only responded with increasingly unhinged threats and derision. Now it had come to this, a standoff of wills, with both sides refusing to back down. Samantha knew she had to act fast before Karen made good on her latest tirade. Pulling out her phone, she rapidly dialed the local animal control number. Karen's eyes widened in alarm. "Don't you dare," she yelled, lunging forward. But Samantha held firm, calmly informing the operator of the unlicensed cats and their aggressive behavior. As she spoke, Karen's tirade only grew more shrill. "You'll be sorry. I'll have the FBI all over you, you filthy criminal." Samantha felt a twinge of regret. She hated confrontation and just wanted this nightmare to end. But she steeled her resolve. Karen had pushed her too far, and now she would face the consequences. Once the call was complete, Samantha leveled a steady gaze at her neighbor. "It's done, Karen. The animal control officers will be here soon. I suggest you get your cats under control." Karen's face turned a mottled red. "You'll be in jail, you hear me? Prison," she shrieked, saliva spraying from her lips. Her cats, sensing her distress, began to howl and claw at the fence. Samantha felt a flicker of satisfaction. "We'll see about that," she said evenly, turning to head back inside her house. As she walked away, she couldn't help but wonder what other surprises this confrontation might hold. The wail of the animal control siren pierced the quiet suburban street as the van pulled up to Karen's house. Two officers stepped out, their faces set in grim determination. Karen raced out to confront them, her cats trailing behind in a yowling mob. "Finally, you're here," she cried. "Arrest that woman next door. She's a criminal." The officers exchanged a weary glance. "Ma'am, we're here about your unlicensed cats. We received a complaint." Karen's face twisted in outrage. "Unlicensed? How dare you? Those are my babies, not some underscore animals underscore. You need to get that woman thrown in jail." One of the officers raised a hand. "We can't do that, ma'am. Our job is to ensure the well-being of the animals. Now, can you please gather your cats so we can check their tags and vaccination records?" Sputtering in fury, Karen turned to glare at Samantha, who had emerged from her house to observe the confrontation. Samantha met her gaze evenly, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. Karen's cats, sensing her distress, began to swarm around the officers' feet, hissing and spitting. The officers tried in vain to corral them, but the animals were too unruly and numerous. "Get those beasts under control, Karen," one of the officers snapped, "or we'll have no choice but to take them in." Karen's eyes widened in panic. "No, you can't. They're mine, you hear." She began frantically chasing after the cats, only to have them scatter further. Samantha watched the scene unfold with a mixture of amusement and trepidation. She knew Karen would not go down without a fight, and the fallout could be unpredictable. As the officers continued their struggle to contain the unruly felines, Karen turned to Samantha once more, eyes blazing with fury. "This isn't over, you hear me?" she spat. "I'm going to make you pay for this, you little bitch." Samantha felt a chill run down her spine, but she refused to show her fear. "We'll see about that, Karen," she replied coolly. The confrontation had only just begun. The air hung thick with tension as the animal control officers tried in vain to wrangle Karen's cats. The felines, sensing their owner's distress, had become even more unruly hissing and swiping at the officers' attempts to catch them. Samantha watched the spectacle with a mixture of satisfaction and trepidation. She knew Karen would not take this defeat lying down, and the older woman's parting threat still echoed in her mind. As the officers continued their struggle, Karen turned to Samantha, her face contorted with rage. "You're going to regret this, you little bitch," she spat. "I'm not going to stop until you're behind bars, where you belong." Samantha felt a chill run down her spine, but she refused to back down. "I'm not the one breaking the law here, Karen. Those cats need to be licensed and kept off the shared lawn. You brought this on yourself." Karen let out a shrill, guttural scream. "I'll show you breaking the law. I'm going to call the FBI, the CIA, the whole damn government on you." She whirled around, storming back into her house, the cats trailing behind her. One of the officers shook his head wearily. "Ma'am, we're going to have to impound those cats if you can't get them under control. They're a danger to the neighborhood." Karen emerged from her house, her face flushed with fury. "You touch my cats, and I'll sue you into oblivion," she shrieked. Turning to Samantha, she pointed a trembling finger. "And you're next. I'm going to make your life a living hell." Samantha felt a surge of trepidation, but she refused to show it. "I've done nothing wrong, Karen. You're the one breaking the law. If you keep this up, you're the one who's going to end up in trouble." Karen let out a mirthless laugh. "We'll see about that, sweetheart. You have no idea what I'm capable of." With that, she stormed back into her house, slamming the door behind her. The officers exchanged a weary glance. "Well, this isn't going to be easy," one of them muttered. Samantha couldn't help but agree. The confrontation was only just beginning, and she had a feeling it was going to get much worse before it got better. The next morning, Samantha awoke to the sound of loud banging on her front door. Heart pounding, she cautiously peered through the peephole, only to see Karen standing on her doorstep, her face contorted with rage. Bracing herself, Samantha opened the door. "What do you want, Karen?" "You're going to pay for what you did, you little bitch," Karen shrieked, spittle flying from her lips. In her hand, she clutched a stack of official-looking papers. Samantha felt a surge of trepidation, but she refused to show it. "I told you, I've done nothing wrong. Those cats were a nuisance, and I had every right to call animal control." Karen let out a harsh, grating laugh. "We'll see about that." She thrust the papers towards Samantha. "I've filed a lawsuit against you for harassment and defamation. You're going to lose everything." Samantha felt her heart sink as she scanned the documents. Karen had wasted no time in retaliating, and the legal battle that lay ahead was sure to be grueling. "You can't be serious," Samantha said, her voice trembling slightly. "This is just petty retaliation, and you know it." "Petty," Karen screeched. "I'll show you petty. I'm going to make your life a living hell, you hear me? You'll be begging for mercy before I'm done with you." Samantha's mind raced, trying to devise a response. She knew she had to tread carefully. Karen was clearly unhinged, and there was no telling what she might do next. "Karen, please," she said, trying to keep her voice calm and even. "Let's not escalate this any further. I'm willing to compromise, but you have to be reasonable." Karen let out a harsh, barking laugh. "Reasonable? Ha! I'm done being reasonable with you, you little criminal." She turned and stalked back to her own house, calling over her shoulder, "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." Samantha watched her go, a sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach. This was far from over, and she knew she was in for a long, hard-fought battle. Samantha spent the next few days in a state of constant anxiety, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Karen's lawsuit had shaken her, and she knew the older woman was more than capable of making good on her threats. As the days passed, Samantha began to receive a steady stream of harassing phone calls and letters, all bearing Karen's distinctive scrawl. The messages were vitriolic, accusing her of everything from animal cruelty to theft. Samantha tried to ignore the onslaught, focusing instead on preparing her legal defense. But it was a constant, nagging distraction, and she found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, half expecting Karen to come storming onto her property at any moment. Then, one afternoon, Samantha's doorbell rang. Peering through the peephole, she let out a heavy sigh. It was the police. Steeling herself, she opened the door. "Officer, how can I help you?" The officer, a middle-aged man with a weary expression, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we've received a complaint from your neighbor, Karen, alleging that you've been harassing her and her pets." Samantha felt her stomach drop. "What? That's completely untrue. I was the one who called animal control about her unlicensed cats." The officer nodded. "Yes, we're aware of that. But Karen is claiming that you've been making threats and vandalizing her property. She's demanding that we take action." Samantha felt a surge of indignation. "That's ridiculous. I've done no such thing. Karen is the one who's been harassing me, not the other way around." The officer held up a hand. "I understand your frustration, ma'am, but we're required to investigate all formal complaints, regardless of their merit. I'm going to need you to come down to the station to make a statement." Samantha felt a sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach. She knew this was exactly the kind of escalation she had been dreading. Karen was clearly pulling out all the stops to try and intimidate her. With a heavy sigh, Samantha nodded. "All right, officer. Let's get this over with." As she followed the officer to his car, she couldn't help but wonder how much further this conflict would spiral. She knew she was in for a long and arduous battle, but she was determined to see it through. The interrogation room at the police station felt oppressive and claustrophobic as Samantha sat across the table from the two detectives. They stared at her with a mixture of skepticism and impatience, clearly eager to get this over with. "So, Miss Simmons, let's start from the beginning," the older detective, a gruff-looking man with a thick mustache, began. "Your neighbor, Karen Wilkins, has filed a complaint alleging that you've been harassing her and vandalizing her property. What do you have to say about that?" Samantha took a deep breath, trying to keep her composure. "That's completely untrue, detective. Karen is the one who's been harassing me. I called animal control about her unlicensed cats, and now she's retaliating by filing a lawsuit and making these outrageous claims." The younger detective, a woman with a sharp gaze, leaned forward. "But you admit to calling animal control on your neighbor's pets." "Yes, I did," Samantha replied. "Her cats were a nuisance, and they weren't licensed. I tried to resolve the issue civilly, but Karen responded with threats and now this." The older detective let out a skeptical hum. "And you haven't done anything to escalate the situation? No vandalism, no threats, nothing like that?" Samantha shook her head emphatically. "Absolutely not. I've been nothing but reasonable throughout this whole ordeal. Karen is the one who's acted irrationally and in bad faith." The detectives exchanged a glance, and Samantha felt a knot of dread forming in the pit of her stomach. She knew they were unlikely to believe her, especially with Karen's complaint on the table. "Well, Miss Simmons, we'll need to investigate this further," the younger detective said, her tone even. "In the meantime, we'd advise you to avoid any further contact with Mrs. Wilkins. Retaliation could land you in serious trouble." Samantha nodded, her heart sinking. "I understand. But I want to make it clear that I've done nothing wrong here. Karen is the one who's been acting irrationally and illegally." The older detective leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "We'll see what the investigation turns up, ma'am. In the meantime, you're free to go." As Samantha stood up to leave, she couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. This was far from over, and she knew that Karen was only just getting started. The following days passed in a haze of anxiety and uncertainty for Samantha. She waited anxiously for any updates from the police, dreading the thought of what Karen might do next. Then, one afternoon, her doorbell rang again. This time, it was a process server, bearing an envelope containing the lawsuit papers. Samantha's heart sank as she read through the accusations. Karen was demanding thousands in damages and even calling for Samantha's imprisonment. Samantha spent the next several hours consulting with a lawyer, trying to devise a strategy to combat Karen's relentless onslaught. Her legal bills were mounting, and the stress was taking a toll on her mental and physical health. Just when Samantha thought things couldn't get any worse, she received a call from her landlord. Apparently, Karen had filed a complaint with the Homeowners Association, alleging that Samantha's yard was in violation of regulations. "I'm sorry, Samantha, but they're demanding that you take care of this immediately," the landlord said, sounding apologetic. "If you don't, they're threatening to fine you or even start eviction proceedings." Samantha felt her stomach churn with dread. But this is ridiculous. Karen is the one with the unlicensed cats and the unkempt yard. How can they possibly side with her on this? The landlord sighed. "I know, Samantha, but the HOA is playing hardball. They're saying if you don't comply, they'll have no choice but to take action." Samantha hung up the phone, her mind reeling. She knew she had to act fast, but the thought of caving to Karen's demands made her feel sick. This was clearly a coordinated effort to break her, and she refused to give in without a fight. Steeling her resolve, Samantha grabbed a pair of gardening gloves and headed outside. If the HOA wanted a tidy yard, then that's exactly what they were going to get. As she began to meticulously tend to her lawn and flower beds, a spark of defiance flickered within her. She might be down, but she certainly wasn't out. Karen had picked the wrong neighbor to mess with, and Samantha was determined to show her that she was a force to be reckoned with. In the days that followed, Samantha threw herself into the battle against Karen's relentless onslaught. She spent countless hours with her lawyer, meticulously building her case and preparing for the inevitable legal showdown. Despite the mounting pressure from the HOA and the looming threat of Karen's lawsuit, Samantha refused to back down. She knew that if she gave in now, Karen would only be emboldened to continue her harassment. As the court date approached, Samantha found herself gathering an unexpected army of allies. Neighbors who had long been wary of Karen's bullying tactics began to come forward, offering to testify on Samantha's behalf. The local animal control officers, too, were more than willing to provide evidence of Karen's negligence with her pets. The day of the trial was tense and nerve-wracking, but Samantha steeled herself for the challenge. She watched as Karen took the stand, her face twisted with a mixture of rage and desperation, and listened as the older woman spewed a litany of lies and accusations. But when Samantha's turn came, she refused to be cowed. She calmly and methodically laid out the facts, presenting a mountain of evidence that clearly demonstrated Karen's wrongdoing. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with a keen eye for detail, listened intently, her expression unreadable. In the end, the verdict was clear-cut. The judge dismissed Karen's lawsuit with prejudice, ordering the older woman to pay Samantha's legal fees and cease all further harassment. Karen's face crumpled in disbelief, and Samantha felt a surge of triumphant vindication. As she left the courthouse, Samantha couldn't help but feel a sense of relief and accomplishment. She had stood her ground against Karen's relentless onslaught, and she had emerged victorious. It had been a long and grueling battle, but in the end, justice had prevailed. Samantha knew that the aftermath of this conflict would be complicated, and she was under no illusion that Karen would simply slink away. But for now, she was content to savor her victory, secure in the knowledge that she had proven herself to be a force to be reckoned with.